Kia ora koutou. This is my research journey as a 7-piece jigsaw puzzle, highlighting my experiences as an early childhood teacher, researcher, writer, and passionate advocate for young children and early childhood education. My first jigsaw piece comes from a geography lens. As a junior lecturer in geography at Victoria University in Wellington in the 1960s, my geography professors, Harvey Franklin and Keith Buchanan, taught me the value of landscape and stressed the significance of understanding people within their environments and their culture. I've also taken from geography the recognition that a combination of knowledge with a positive attitude to learning more about something is to be nourished and cherished. John Dewey, in his book entitled Experience and Education, made the link that I needed, a link between attitude and geography, when he wrote the following in 1938. Learning in the way of formation of enduring attitudes of likes and dislikes may be and often is much more important than the spelling lesson or lesson in geography or history that is learnt. For these attitudes, he adds, are fundamentally what count in the future. At Victoria University, I took a Year 1 philosophy paper to add to my interest in geography, and this unlikely combination of geography and philosophy has shaped my career in early childhood education. My second jigsaw puzzle piece is an interest in early childhood philosophies. At the beginning of the 1970s, my family and I moved from Wellington to Hamilton for my husband Malcolm to take up a position in the chemistry department at the University of Waikato. Later, while he was on leave, we all spent time in London, and our 2 children, Merafi and Polly, participated in different early years programs: Montessori, playgroup, and kindergarten. I was intrigued by their experiences and the philosophical backgrounds that engaged them. So when we returned from England, I trained as an early childhood teacher at Hamilton Teachers College. My first position was at Newcastle Kindergarten in Ngaruawahia, and I rode my 125cc motorbike out to work each morning, watching out for patches of frost and ice on Hamilton's wintry days. I have to say that this received considerable respect from the tamariki at Newcastle Kindergarten. My third jigsaw piece is thinking about assessments in early childhood. At Newcastle and later as a teacher at Chartwell Kindergarten in Hamilton, I puzzled over how to describe the children's progress. I didn't have the language for it. But after the children's story reading in comfortable cushions or at mat time, I began to invite them to make up their own stories, especially about their favourite book characters. I wrote their stories down for them and often persuaded them to provide some illustrations. At this time, I met up with Wendy Lee, the director of the Professional Development Program, ELP, Educational Leadership Project, and we were bold enough to consider stories as a mode of assessment. My fourth jigsaw piece is entitled An Innovative Curriculum for ECE. In the early 1990s, our Ministry of Education began to take a particular interest in early childhood education and assessment, and decided that we needed a curriculum. Sir Tamati and Lady Tilly Reedy worked with Helen May and me to develop ideas for an early childhood curriculum in Aotearoa. It rapidly became clear that this was not to be a list of physical, intellectual, emotional and social measurable outcomes. The Reedies insisted on a cultural lens, and they travelled to every iwi in the country to seek advice. We discussed at length and finally agreed on a socio-cultural framing. In English, these became well-being, belonging, contribution, communication and exploration. In Te Reo Māori, They are domains of mana, mana atua, mana whenua, mana tangata, mana rau, mana Aotearoa. Now we had some of the language we needed to describe the children's achievements and their progress, and I became interested in learning dispositions as a frame, children being ready, willing and able to engage with this innovative Te Whāriki curriculum. Soon after the launch of Te Whāriki, I completed my PhD at the University of Waikato. It was entitled Technological Practice in Early Childhood as a Dispositional Milieu. Our fifth jigsaw piece is entitled Learning Stories. I first wrote about this in 2001. The book was entitled Assessment in Early Childhood Settings, Learning Stories. Wendy and I then wrote 2 more books, and Sage Publications in London published them. First one was in 2012, Learning Stories Constructing Learner Identities in Early Education. The second was in 2019, Learning Stories in Practice. Here were voices that provided another link between attitude and geography. Wendy Lee and her professional development project took this mode of assessment and these exemplars of young children's learning to early childhood teachers worldwide. The Ministry of Education in Aotearoa then published 20 booklets entitled Kei Tua Te Pai Beyond the Horizon, and a set was sent to every early childhood centre and school. One booklet was entitled Children Contributing to Their Own Assessment. How important was that? My sixth jigsaw piece is entitled Learning in the Making, a MARSDEN Fund project. With Professor Anne Smith from Otago University as the leader, I was one of 6 authors from 3 universities plus Wendy from ELP to participate in a MARSDEN Fund research project entitled Dispositions in Social Context in the Early Years. We followed 14 children over 18 months of their early education. A 2009 book entitled Learning in the Making was published by Sense Publishers. We were delighted when Emeritus Professor Jacqueline Goodnow from Macquarie University in Sydney wrote a 2.5-page foreword. It included the following. This book is a rare example of work that has 2 firm bases. One is the conceptual analyses of learning. The other is in what one learns from the longitudinal following of individual children and particular aspects of change. My 7th and final jigsaw piece is entitled A Second Royal Society Marsden Fund Project. This final jigsaw piece describes another Marsden Fund project with a theme of culture and creativity and a topic of young children visiting museums widely defined. 2 projects are included. The first project within this fund involved the Tai Tamariki Kindergarten in the basement of the National Museum Te Papa in Wellington. We observed children as they visited an exhibition, and we published 2 papers, each with 5 authors that included the teachers. One in the European Early Childhood Education Research Journal, and one in the Journal of Museum Management and Curatorship. Also within this Marsden Fund is a second project based in Mana Tamariki Kohangareo Matakura in Palmerston North. The project title for this project was gifted to us by Mana Tamariki, He Taonga He Reorenga Ararangi. Where there are treasured objects, the spirit is nurtured and creativity will be inspired. It gathered together researchers from the Wilf Malcolm Institute of Education Research, together with Kayako Brenda Suter and Leanne Clayton. All the Kayako at Mana Tamariki were writing pakiako, learning stories, and many of the Tamariki dictated their own. A book authored by the Manatamariki Kayako and the University of Waikato researchers will be published late this year in a Rutledge series of anthropology studies in creativity and perception. So I have continued to seize opportunities to connect philosophy and place, creating a jigsaw puzzle that advocates for children in ECE to have their own voices, with their own curriculum and within their own assessments. And I warmly thank the Royal Society for the fellowship and this opportunity to reflect on my academic journey. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou.